everyone, who are here back with chapter 5 of The Bodyguard and the Courtesan. I hope that you have been enjoying this series and I'd love to hear from you. Drop your comments and I'll read through them. The weather has gotten a little bit cooler, a sign that fall is around the corner. So take out those winter coats and hats, folks, because Mr. Winter is coming soon. All right, sit back, relax. Let's begin, shall we? The moon was high in the night sky as the carriages began arriving to the front entrance of the palace. Waylon was weary, and he did not feel like making a public appearance with a woman he had no desire for. She had been dabbing on extra powder on her nose for the past half hour of the ride. She had been asking if she looked good, and he kept repeating yes, until she realized he was not even looking her way. As he helped Samara down from the steps, his eyes scanned the crowd, hoping to see someone he knew, and without paying attention to her, moved too fast, causing her to trip. The tug from his hand and her missing a step made her knees hit the ground. Her sudden painful gasp made him turn around. "My Lord!" she cried as she struggled to stand. He reached down and pulled her up a bit too harshly, and she shrieked loudly. Several heads turned to look at them as she stood and adjusted her gown. "I apologize, my lady," Waylon said. Samara gave him a glare and let out a heavy breath. "I paid a lot of money for this dress. If I go in there looking like a fool, I'll be sure to parade your name with me." Waylon rolled his eyes and walked ahead as she huffed behind him. The mere voice of that woman made him want to jump off a cliff. He was nearing the entrance of the palace when he recognized a laugh behind him. Swiftly, he turned and found Maisie walking up the stairs wearing a very ladylike gown with Kaiden. Her hand was on his arm, and his smile was glowing. The jealousy inside him ripped through him, and his hands curled into fists. He noticed that Samara had turned to speak to a woman coming up the stairs. When her eyes fell on his, the smile on her face disappeared, and he felt an emotion deep in his heart hammer against him. "Ladies and gentlemen," a servant's voice said as he came to stand at the top of the stairs. "A quick change in itinerary. The Queen would like to have the ladies in the garden for a cup of tea, while the King would like the gentlemen in the drawing board for a smoke. Please adjust accordingly." Waylon watched as Kaiden bent down and captured her lips before leaving her. Samara and the woman hurried toward the direction of the garden. Perfect, he thought, as he waited until Kaiden made his way to the entrance, and he reached over to take her hand, pulling her to the hidden doorway behind the front entrance. Once there, he kissed her by force and held her. At first she resisted, but then she stopped, and slowly her hands came to wrap around him. "Why him?" Waylon whispered. She tried to push herself away, but he held tightly. "Don't struggle. Just let me hold you. It feels like it's been forever." "Let me go," she whispered. "You are engaged, and I am about to be wed. I no longer care about the rules. My heart was shattered when Delaney told me of your freedom. I have been on battlefields where death came at me, and yet that day she told me was the first time I was afraid." She smiled, and tears began shining in her ears. "Why would you be afraid?" Waylon pulled away and wiped at her tears. "I am afraid I will lose you forever. Never again getting to be near you and watching you from a distance while someone else loves you for me to see. This was not the life I planned for us. I have wanted no one else to carry my name but you." Maisie lowered her gaze, and then she looked up at him. "My lord, I have had to endure my desire for you every single day since the moment I met you. I have had to hide my thoughts of you for fear of being punished. I know that my life and yours is not matched to be fated as one. So when I see her on your arm, I will silently pretend that it were me. Even freed, I am still unable to love you as I would like." He cupped her face. "You never told me this. Why now? Why this moment?" "Because I am a free woman and I can speak without fear. Before, I was a courtesan and was known as just that. But even now your arms are promised to another, and I have given my heart to a man who will love me, yet all I see when I look at him is your face. Forever is a punishment when you are not in love." Waylon pulled her to him and kissed her, feeling her curves beneath his palm. "Why do the gods punish us?" Waylon whispered against her lips. "I want you and none other. Yet I have to watch as someone else claims you." She wrapped her arms around him. "In the moments you are alone, think of our shared times, my lord. I carry you in my heart, now and forever." She kissed him once and left.
It takes so little just to make me smile, but you don't seem to be around.
Maisie was not surprised by the amount of women staring at her as she sat in the garden with the queen. Many were whispering, and she noticed Samara giving her the evil eye. The servants finished serving tea to everyone, and the queen, who was sitting elegantly at the front, picked up her teacup and smiled at them. Queen Tamasini's gentle eyes caught hers, and she stopped briefly to watch her before moving on to the others. "My ladies," she said, "tonight is a gala to prepare us for the New Year fast. Every year I dedicate this time for my wonderful ladies to help bring me ideas to decorate the kingdom. I would like to hear your voice, especially new faces, like—" She turned to look at Maisie. "Yours." Maisie froze, and everyone turned to look at her. She felt awkward as she set her teacup down and smiled gently. She stood up and bowed to the queen. "My queen, I am not certain I can offer you any help." "You mean your years as a courtesan was simply to offer pleasure, and you have no knowledge of anything?" This came from a woman in the back with a sneer. "Courtesan?" Samara asked, her eyes widening. "Is that what you are? No wonder I thought the entire male species is attracted to you. You have had them all in your bed." "Of course she has," another woman added. "Her back has seen so much mattress, I am surprised she can stand it all." Another laughed and added, "The fashion she wears is a gift from all of our husbands. We wear trash while she wears royal." Maisie felt the hot tears roll down her cheeks, and she stood up to go when the queen shouted for her to stop. Turning slowly around, she watched as the queen stood and the many women around her lowered their gazes. This palace hall has never been one to look down upon another. But today, you, my dear, have come joined our society not as a royal woman, but as a commoner who has known all of our husbands, the king himself. You are the envy of us all," Queen Tomasini said. "If I were you, I would not shed a single tear. You have won us all." Maisie wiped her tears and straightened. "Does that make you feel better about yourselves? If you were born in my shoes, you would never dare make any remarks. But none of you have ever been stripped of anything and fed to the wolves. Your tummies have known good hot food while I dug in the alleys for crumbs. Although my life has been only a courtesan, I at least have the honor of a well-brought-up woman. I cannot say the same for you." She felt someone turn her around, and she stared into the eyes of Samara, and the woman's hand slapped her across the face on each side of her cheeks. The impact made her lose her breath, and she stumbled backward until she fell into a pair of arms. She turned around to find Kaiden holding her, and then he gently took her hand, pulling her close to him. "Take your little cat away from here," Samara said. "We do not like thieves who steal from others." Kaiden smiled and looked at her. "Careful, Lady Samara. Did you not also steal Waylon from others?" She gasped as Kaiden smirked and led Maisie out of the garden. Once they made it out to the steps, he signaled for the servant to bring their carriage around. Are you all right? Kaiden asked. Maisie felt her cheeks burn. Please take me home. They heard feet running and saw an out-of-breath Waylon rushing to them. The moment he saw her, Maisie's eyes filled with tears. He reached out to her when Samara called out his name from behind him. How dare you make a fool of me, my lord? If you even think about touching her, I will cut off your hand, Samara said. Then cut off everyone's hand, including the king's, for we have all touched her, Waylon said. The carriage arrived and Kaiden helped her inside as he turned around to Waylon. Lord Waylon, if you intend to uphold your name as a soldier in battle, you must first contain your spoiled bride-to-be. If she ever puts another hand on my wife, I will have no choice but to remove her tongue. Samara opened her mouth to speak when Waylon raised his hand. She stumbled backward from his action, and he turned to Kaiden. I give my apologies to Maisie. Take care of her, and I will make sure it never happens again. See that you do, Kaiden said. As Kaiden came in to sit across from her, Maisie glanced out and saw Waylon's tearful stare as the carriage began pulling away.
In the club, in the streets, waking up, yeah, always when we meet, something's still missing.
I am so blind. Of course she would be a courtesan. That is how the entire male population knows her, Samara cried as they rode the carriage back home. She was sitting across from Waylon, her heated anger clearly not going away as the ride went on. Waylon had a headache, and he was certainly not in the mood to argue. Have you gone to her since we agreed to wed? He looked up at her. You mean since you agreed to wed? Do not give me that same old sick tale of yours. You know you want me. My lady, who would ever want you? Your voice is non-stop bickering and bashing every single moment. I cannot even hear myself think. She stopped and her eyes widened. You honestly think any man out there would want you around him? Silence does not exist around you. You have murdered peace and quiet when your mouth opens up. She gasped lightly and leaned back, her mouth trembling. Is that what you think of me? If I am that bad, why would you agree to marry me? I do not have a choice. The king bestowed you to me, and I must fulfill his request. I am a request? She whispered. Where is love in that? There is no love. There never will be. I will allow you to carry my name, and once in a blue moon, perhaps share a bed with you, maybe long enough for an heir to be produced. But beyond that, you will give to her, Samara asked sadly. Is that right? Waylon sighed heavily. You do not understand how the heart works. You cannot summon me to be your husband and expect me to come with love when it is by command. I will give you what is ordered of me, but beyond that, my desire, my love, is gifted to another. She sobbed. I love you, my lord. My life is perfect when I am with you. I have chosen you. Why can you not choose me in return? It is not how human hearts work, my lady. When I look at you, I see a woman good enough for a wife who will bring me stability. Samara wiped her eyes. And when you look at her? Smiling, he replied, when I look at her, it is my entire world looking back at me. She began crying. You have made a fool of me. This whole time, I thought she was a commoner who you liked. I did not even stop to think that she was a courtesan. She has known you in ways I have not even known yet. Laughing, he replied, she has known many men better than their wives. Does that not make you sick, that she has slept with the entire male crowd in this kingdom? No, Waylon said, because with them, it was service. She wiped at her eyes and sniffed. What are you talking about? He leaned forward. They paid her to sleep with them. With me, she gave me her body without money. True pleasure and love existed between us. The times we spent together were so tightly shared that not even a breath of wind could come between us. When he looked at her, Samara had a dark look in her eyes. She sniffed and crossed her arms, staying silent. Waylon turned away and hoped that Maisie was safe at home. The only part that gutted him was that it would not be his arms holding her tonight. He was broken when she gave him that last final glance. It was a glance he'd seen too often when she asked for help. I am so naive, hoping that you would turn to me when I asked for your hand in marriage. But this woman has been so deeply embedded into your heart that there is no way to remove her. How can I ever compete with that? Samara whispered. She laughed and then shook her head. I am beyond appalled that you do not see this as sickening. The entire male crowd that lives and thrives in this kingdom has had her in bed. They know the most intimate parts of her, and yet you cannot let her go. Is this something a man like you can live with? Lady Samara, what happens behind closed doors with those other men has been shared with me. It is not as if I am blinded or shielded from that fact. Maisie has shared with me everything anyone has ever done with her, and they are not nearly quite as intimate as she has been with me. He leaned forward. I was open about my feelings for you, my lady. I never hid anything about how I felt in my thoughts on wedded bliss. But your hand has always been bold and your voice has always been loud. You chose to offer the marital contract to the king who bestowed it upon me. I cannot deny it, for I am his royal bodyguard. But I do not have to love and care for someone who I truly cannot stand. The name you will gain will be mine, yes, but beyond that, it is simply just the two of us living within the same walls to create an image that the public will smile upon. Samara reached over and slapped him across the face. I tell you this now. I am not someone to fool around with. I will make it known that if your little whore does not retract her fangs, I will pull them out and hand it over to you on a golden plate. Waylon grabbed her wrist and pulled her to him with such force that she gasped painfully. If I ever find your hands on her, I will never let you live to see another day of light.
In the club, in the streets, waking up, yeah, always when we meet, something's still missing. We're still faking it, we pretend.
The cottage was cold when Maisie arrived home with Kaiden, and as he quickly made his way to light up the wood, she went to grab a second cloak to wear. It took a few moments before the fire was burning, and she came to sit beside him as he warmed her hands up. The evening had not gone as she had hoped for, and this was her first discovery that the women in society did not hold back their tongues when it came to her. She would have to learn how to protect herself sooner rather than later. There were a lot of things she needed to improve on, and one of them was making sure she knew how to speak wisely when making an insult. Are you hurt? Kaiden asked as he drew her into his arms. I am saddened that the ladies at court treated you this way. Do not be, she whispered. It is expected, for I am not of their status. I come from a different background than them, and their men have shared my bed. I am sure they are not pleased to know that I can now roam openly among them in public. Still, it is not a way to treat another person. It was rude and uncalled for. They call themselves ladies of the court, yet their behavior is nothing of that. Maisie lowered her gaze, and she took in a deep breath. I do not expect equal treatment. I never have. No one will understand the life I have lived but me. She tilted her chin to look up at him. I do. He lowered his lips and kissed her gently. When he tried to deepen the kiss, Maisie pulled away and cleared her throat. She knew the pained look in his eyes, but she lowered her gaze and tucked her hair behind her ears. My apologies. I am a bit exhausted. He smiled and wrapped his arms around her. Wash up. You have had a long night. Kaiden's soft breathing beside her made her eyes tear up. She could not continue this facade, and she was afraid that if she continued to pretend with him, the only person who would hate her in the end would be herself. The first morning light, she would find a way to tell him of the emotions trapping her heart and hope he would understand. Perhaps it was not meant for them to be lovers, but they could continue to have a simpler relationship. Her mind returned to Waylon and the embrace he had given her. Even in public, Her heart still wandered to him and what he would say to her. Why did the universe punish her so harshly? Why must she endure pain for the rest of her life? Even as a freed woman, her heart would be forever trapped. The first morning light poured into the room, and Maisie pushed herself up, moving Kaiden's arm from around her waist. She pulled on a robe and walked out to the well to gather up water to wash up. As she reached for the bucket, the knock from behind her blinded her into a blackened state of sleep. When she did wake, it was from a pounding headache, and she felt as if her body had been trampled on by a horse. The room she was in was dark and smelled of mold. A rat ran across the room, and she yelped, pushing herself to stand up. There were iron bars on the windows and a torn mattress on the ground. Where was she? "Hello?" she cried. "Can anyone hear me?" Silence. Fear entered her heart fast and hard as tears welled up in her eyes. She ran to the door and began knocking, her fists pounding on the wooden frame. She screamed over and over for help, making as much noise as possible. Silence. She sank to the ground, and that was when she heard the keys opening the door, and who should walk in but Samara. "You," Maisie whispered as she stood up, her eyes not believing her. "This room never used to reek of filth until you came to stay here," Samara said with a sneer. "What is your purpose of this? If Waylon finds out you had anything to do with this, he would gut you alive." Laughing, she replied, "And how would he know if no one tells him? The dead do not talk." Maisie's eyes widened. "You thought you could best me by becoming a free woman to roam the kingdom? You are mistaken. Waylon will never look at you, and if he dares to, the king will have his head. The woman that is proper for him is me." Maisie shook her head in disbelief. "You are bold, Lady Samara. You think that by capturing me here and holding me prisoner, your life will be grand? Waylon is not an imbecile, and as soon as I am reported missing, he will drop everything to find me. I cannot wait to see the disappointment in you." Samara smiled and walked to her. "Well, if you do not have your eyes, you cannot see, can you?" "Where is she?" Kaiden cried as he entered the guard's training site, where Waylon turned to eye him. The men at arms all stopped and turned as Waylon waved them away. Once they were alone, Kaiden grabbed Waylon's tunic and pulled him fiercely toward him. "What did you do to her?" he asked. "What on earth are you talking about? I have been training my men since the early morning dawn hours." Kaiden let his tunic go as he narrowed his eyes. "I went to bed with Maisie in my arms, and I woke up to find her gone. The struggle near the well tells me someone did something to her." Waylon's eyes opened wider and he frowned. "And you are just here now?" He began running to his horse as Kaiden followed. "How long has she been missing?" "I woke 3 hours ago and noticed her gone." "Grab a horse. Let us find her." Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 6 will be up shortly.
In the club, in the streets, waking up. Yeah, always when we meet, something's still missing.